2 traffic, 260s.
Come on, fire!
Roger.
Unmanned aerial vehicles, better known as drones, are reshaping how we go to war. Instead of putting boots on the ground, our leaders are more and more willing to send robots to do the fighting, which has raised concerns for some human rights groups. Best-selling author and consultant to the U.S. Department of Defense, Peter W. Singer, spoke at Concordia University on the use of new unmanned technologies in medicine, domestic policing, and why governments are turning to drones in war.
They can take on tasks that in English they describe as the 3 Ds, tasks that are dull, dirty, and in particular dangerous. The very benefit of being able to send a drone into harm's way and not worry about losing the pilot sounds greatly appealing, but it also means that politicians may think about those missions differently.
U.S. President Barack Obama made what some say is the toughest decision of his political career, when he ordered 2 teams of Navy SEALs to kill Osama bin Laden in his compound in Pakistan. Singer compares the difficulty of authorizing this operation to the way drone strikes are more loosely ordered in the same country.
He didn't use that kind of narrative to describe the decision to carry out more than 350 airstrikes, drone strikes, into the same country. The way we talk about it is different because of the lack of risk to us. And at one point in time, a helicopter, a U.S. Navy helicopter, was lost over Libya. This would have been a really big deal. Not so popular war, Navy helicopter lost, except it was a robotic helicopter. So there were no pilots killed or taken prisoner. So we can see how it changes the politics of it.
Senior Director of the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies, Kyle Matthews, says we'll see more and more drone usage in war and addresses the detachment between pilot, machine, and battlefield.
I think this is not going away. I think we're going to see this more and more. And what people have always criticized about this is that people operating these drone operating rooms, that they're so far removed from war that they treat this almost like a video game. It's being seen by some as very easy, as being not messy. And that raises a lot of important questions as far as the use of robotics for war, whether it contravenes international human rights standards or international humanitarian laws that govern the use of force in conflict.
Peter Singer disagrees with the notion of detachment, citing similarities in the conditions of drone operators and jet pilots.
The pilots take it quite seriously. They don't think they're playing video games, and in fact many of them are dealing with levels of combat stress and fatigue that are comparable, at least based on studies, to what units physically in combat face.
Former Master Corporal in the Canadian Army, Joseph Léger, has called in several drone strikes during his tour in Afghanistan, and says even soldiers participating in war from 7,000 miles away can suffer consequences to their mental health.
They hear you talking on the radio on the ground when you're in combat, and that can create a very, because there's a lot of emotion that comes out on the radio. We're trained to speak in a very kind of monotone, calm, very concise, clear way, but there's obviously times in combat that you're overwhelmed a little bit and you're going to be a little bit more excited, and that comes through on the radio. So there's a very intimate kind of thing of watching these people moving around on the ground that are real people, and then seeing them die. And you do see the effects of that. You see the body parts. You see that kind of the gruesome violence and the effects of what you do.
Léger went on to explain that without boots on the ground, it is nearly impossible to verify intelligence in order to ensure civilian safety, which can explain the collateral damage in Pakistan and Yemen so heavily criticized by human rights groups.
In one way, it's a very fuzzy zone. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But one thing for sure is that governments don't want to put foot soldiers into situations like that because there's a high likelihood that they'll be killed or there'll be casualties, and that doesn't go well for the ballot box back home. No one wants to see dead soldiers, or Western soldiers, being paraded through the street like we had in Black Hawk Down.
For Singer, the bigger issue is that an estimated 450 civilian deaths caused by drone strikes may contribute to a rise in extremism.
So the real question that's out there, particularly when you're talking about these counterterrorism strikes, is it creating fear among a broader populace, not just the target you're going after, but the broader populace that may have been undecided or maybe even have been against those militants, but now fears the strike more. For all the terrorists that you may be killing, are you creating more anger in those locations and actually making it easier for those terrorists to recruit?
There's no controlling the evolution of new technologies and their effects in our lives. However, U.S. congressmen have recently begun writing legislation that would guarantee civilians' privacy and safety and ease us into a future where drones are commonplace. For Concordia News, I'm Vanik.